ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। ॐ अखण्डमण्डलाकारम् व्याप्तं येन चराचरम् तत्पदं दर्शितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। Shivam friends, so today now we'll take reading of chapter 41 of Upasna Khand onwards. And in this chapter there is installation of Prahlada in his kingdom by Lord Vishnu. Vasishtha said, after Vishnu, the receptacle of three worlds and observer of everything that passes in them, had spoken in this way with his lucid speech, shedding the coolness of moonbeams, Prahlad became full blown in his body. His eyes shone forth like blooming lotuses. Then he spoke out with full possession of his mental powers. Prahlad said, Lord, I was greatly tired from my very many state affairs and from thinking about the welfare and sorrow of my people. Now I have found a little rest from my labor. By your grace, my Lord, I am settled in myself. Whether I am in my meditation or waking state, I enjoy the tranquility of my mind at all times. I always see you with the clear vision of my mind seated in my heart. By my good luck, now I have you in my presence outside of it. All this time, I have been sitting without any thought in me. I was mixed up in my mind's internal vision of you like air in air. I was not affected by grief or dullness, or infatuated by my zeal of asceticism or a wish to renounce my body. The one all being present in the mind, there is no room for any grief at the loss of anything, no care for the world, or caution of the body or life, or any fear of any kind abides in his presence. I had been situated in my holy saint-like state simply by pure desire of holiness, arising spontaneously within me. Yes, my Lord, I am disgusted with this world and long to resign its cares, together with all the mutations of joy and grief that alternately arise in the minds of the unenlightened. Yes, yet I don't think that our embodied state is subject to misery. I don't think that being freed from the bonds of the body is the cause of our release. Worldliness is a venomous snake in the bosom. It torments only the ignorant, not the sage. It is the ignorant and not the learned whose minds fluctuate with the thoughts that this is pleasure and the other is pain, that I have this and am in want of another. The ignorant man thinks himself to be a person distinct from another. So all living beings are devoid of the knowledge of truth and entertain and exult in their egoistic thoughts. The false idea that such things are acceptable to me and others are not so serves only to delude the ignorant, not the wise. All things being contained and situated in my all pervading spirit, how can we accept one and reject another thing as distinct from and undesirable to the identical one? The whole universe, whether real or unreal, is a manifestation of omniscience. We know not what is desirable or detestable in it to be accepted or rejected by us. It is only by the discrimination of the nature of the viewer and the view, and by reflecting on the Supreme Soul in oneself, that the mind receives its rest and tranquility. During my samadhi, I was freed from the consciousness of my being or not being, and of whatever is desirable or detestable to anyone. I continue in the same state of my mind even after I am awakened. This state being familiar to me, I see everything in the spirit within myself, and I act according to as it pleases you. O lotus-eyed Vishnu, you are adored in all the three worlds, therefore it benefits you to receive my adorations also, offered in the proper form. Vasishtha speaking, saying so, the Lord of Danav demons presented a platter of presents before the god, like the Lord of Hills making offerings to the full moon. First, he worshipped Vishnu together with his weapons and his vehicle Garud. Then he adored the bands of the gods and Apsara nymphs who accompanied him and the three worlds contained in him. After he had done worshipping the Lord of the worlds, with the worlds situated within and without him, the Lord of Lakshmi spoke to him, saying, Rise, O Lord of Dhanva, and sit upon your throne, and I shall perform your inauguration this very moment. Vishnu then blew his five-note conch shell, summoning the five races of gods, the spiritual masters, true disciples, men, and Daitya demons to attend the ceremony. After this, the lotus-eyed god placed Prahlada on the throne, which he deserved, causing him to sit like cloud rests on a mountain summit. Then Vishnu caused him to make a sacred ablution with the waters that were presented before him from the Milky and other oceans, and those of the Ganges and other holy rivers. The assembly of Brahmins and Rishis, and all groups of spiritual masters and Vidyadhars, together with the rulers of the quarters, attended and assisted at the ceremony. Then Vishnu, the immeasurable spirit, anointed the great Asura demon in the kingdom of Daityas. The Marut winds sang his praises as they do the hymns of Vishnu in heaven. Then, blessed by the gods and praised by Asuras, Prahlad greeted them all in turn, and in the end was addressed by Vishnu, the slayer of Madhu. The Lord said, Rule here as sole monarch as long as Mount Meru stands on earth and the sun and moon shine in the sky. Be filled with all praiseworthy virtues of your own. Govern your kingdom without any interested motive of your own, and without showing any symptom of anger or fear on your part. Preserve your moderation and a tolerant spirit in all your affairs. May you never have any disquiet in this kingdom of excellent soil and plenteous provisions. Don't create any disturbance to the gods in heaven or to man on earth below. Conduct yourself in your proper course at all events which may occur to you at any time or place. Never allow yourself to be led astray by the sudden whims of your mind or the freaks of fancy. Keep your spiritual being in mind and abandon your egoism and selfish views altogether. Then, by managing your affairs in one even tenor, both in your want and prosperity, you will evade all the changing ways of fortune. You have seen both the ways and dealings of this world and measured also the immeasurable depth of spiritual knowledge. You know the state of everything in every place and require no one's advice. As you are now perfectly devoid of anger, passions, and fears, there is no more any chance of further conflict between the gods and asuras under your rule over them in future. No more will the tears of asura women wash the decorations on their faces, nor will the currents of rivers rise as high as lofty trees with floods of tears from their weeping eyes. From this day on, the cessation of hostilities between the gods and demons will render the earth as quiet as the calm ocean after its churning by Mandara mountain. No more will the wives of gods and demigods be led away in captivity by one another. In the future, they will rest fearless under the marital roofs of their husbands. Now let your expectations rise from their dormancy in many long nights of dismal darkness. Be crowned with success and prosperity, O descendant of Danu. Enjoy your unconquerable royal fortune as in the company of your charming consort. So, with this chapter 41 comes to an end, and in the chapter 42, God realization in the form of one worship God. Vashiji is saying, the lotus-eyed Vishnu, having said all this to Prahlad, left the abode of the Asura with the whole concourse of assembled gods, kinners, and men. Prahlad and his associates threw handfuls of flowers on the departing god as he was mounted on the back of Garud, the king of birds. The god crossed the heavenly Ganges and reached the Milky Ocean, where he took his serpent couch like a black bee sitting on a lotus leaf. The god Vishnu sat on his serpent seat with as much ease as Indra sits in heaven in the assembly of the gods, and as the lord of the demons was made to sit in the infernal region, wholly devoid of all his cares. Ram, now I have told you the whole story of Prahlad coming to his sense from the samadhi state of unconsciousness. This story is as charming to the holy listener as cooling moonbeams are refreshing to a tired traveler. The man who ponders in his mind the manner of Prahlad awakening to life is regenerated in that blissful state from the sinfulness of his former condition. A simple repetition of this story wipes off the sins of man. The deep consideration of its spiritual meaning leads one to his eternal salvation. The ignorant are released from their ignorance, and the deep thinker is released from his sins. Therefore, don't neglect to ponder well on it for the remission of your sins. The man who considers well the manner of Prahlad attaining liberation gets a remission of all his sins committed in his repeated previous states of life. Ram said, tell me, sage, how did the sound of the five-conch shell rouse the mind of Devat Prahlad from its immersion in holy meditation? Vashiji replied, Ram, no, there are two states of liberation attending sinless persons. One is the emancipation in his embodied state in this life, and other is after his departure from here. Embodied liberation means one continues in his living body but with a state of mind freed from its attachment to worldly things and liberated from the desire of fruition and reward of all his meritorious acts. Disembodied liberation is obtained after the soul is released from the body and is settled in the Supreme Spirit. It is freedom from the recurrence of future life and birth in this mortal world. The living liberated man is like a fried grain whose germinating power is parched within itself and the desire of whose heart is purified from every expectation of future reward or regeneration. He who resigns himself solely to the meditation of the great soul remains in the pure, holy, and magnanimous state of his mind. He continues as if he were asleep in his living and waking states. Being thus entranced in his inner meditation, he continues in a samadhi state for 1,000 years and wakes again to his senses if he is allowed to live after that period. Prahlad remains thus with his holy thoughts suppressed within himself until he was roused from his samadhi by the shrill sound of the conch shell. Vishnu is the soul of all beings, and he who assimilates himself to that God in his thought becomes identified with the Supreme Soul, which is the cause of all. I will repeat: Vishnu is the soul of all beings, and he who assimilates himself to that God in his thought becomes identified with the Supreme Soul, which is the cause of all. No sooner the God thought that Prahlad should come to his sense than his sensation came immediately to him at the divine will. The world has no other cause but the divine spirit, which, with the assistance of the causal elements, takes different forms upon itself at the time of creation. Therefore, it is the spirit of Vishnu that constitutes the world. Worship of God in spirit presents Vishnu to the spiritual sight. Worship of Vishnu in his outward form represents the figure to the soul and the inner mind. O Ram, put all visible sights out from your view and look at the innermost soul within yourself. When you are accustomed to such spiritual meditation, soon you will have the sight of your God. So let me repeat this instruction of Vasishtha. O Ram, put all visible sights out from view and look at the innermost soul within yourself. When you are accustomed to such spiritual meditation, soon you will have the sight of your God. The world presents a scene of gloomy rainy weather with showers of grief falling on all sides. It is likely to freeze us in ignorance unless we look at the sun of our reason. By grace of God, we can avoid the delusions of the world just as we can escape a demon by means of a spell. The thick darkness of the mind is dispersed and cleared off in time through the will of the Spirit. The world is a network of delusion which is scattered like smoke by the breeze of reason. Now, in the next chapter 43, the worship of the formless versus the forms of God is discussed. Ramji said, Sage, your knowledge of all truths and the light of your holy discourses have gratified me as much as cooling moonbeams gratify medicinal plants. Your gentle and purifying words are as gratifying to my ears as beautiful and sweet flowers delight the external senses. Sage, if the efforts of men, as you said, are the causes of their success, how did Prahlad attain enlightenment without his effort or attempt? Vashiji replied, Yes, Ram, it was by his courageous effort that the high minded Prahlad acquired his divine knowledge. There was no other cause. Again, Prahlad, only by his courageous efforts, acquired his divine knowledge. There was no other cause. The soul of the man is the same as the spirit of Narayan. There is no difference between them. just as there is none between oil and sesame seed, or cloth and its whiteness, or as the flower and its fragrance are not distinct things. Vishnu is the same as his spirit, and the soul of man and the human soul is the same with Vishnu. Vishnu and soul are synonymous terms like plant and vegetable. First, Prahlad came to know the soul by himself. Afterwards, through his intellectual power, he was led to his devotions to Vishnu, and he made many converts after his own example. By his own efforts, Prahlad obtained his grace and blessing from Vishnu. By the exercise of his own reasoning, he came to the knowledge of the eternal mind. Sometimes the soul is awakened of itself by one's own intuition. At other times, the soul is roused by the grace of the personal God Vishnu, owing to one's faith in his person. And though this God may be pleased with the devotee's prolonged service and devout worship, yet the God is unable to confer spiritual knowledge to one devoid of his reasoning faculty. Hence, the primary cause of his spiritual light in is a man's intelligence, which is only gained by exertion of his mental powers. The secondary causes may be the blessing and grace of God, but I wish that you prefer the former method for your salvation, your own intuition. Therefore, first exert your personal efforts to keep the fivefold organs of self sense under proper control. Regularly and diligently practice cultivating your understanding and the power of reasoning. For know that whatever gain anyone makes at any time is only due to his own efforts and not by any other means whatever. Only by relying upon your personal powers can you surmount the insuperable barriers of your sensual desires. Then, by crossing over the ocean of this world, you reach the other shore of the supreme joy. It requires no personal effort to see an idol of Vishnu, but the mere sight of the idol is not enough to save you, or else the birds and beasts would all be saved by looking at it. If a spiritual guide had the power to save his foolish followers by his preaching, it would also be possible for the spiritual guides of camels and cattle to save their herds in their future lives. It is only in the power of the mind to acquire anything good for one's self. The favor of Vishnu or Shiva or the influence of money is not able to affect or effect anything. It is by constant practice, accompanied by self resignation and self control, that one is able to effect anything. Whatever he is unable to do by these means is impossible for anyone in the three worlds. Look to the Spirit in the Spirit and adore the Spirit in your own soul. Behold the Supreme Soul in yourself. Have the universal soul in your own soul and thus remain with it. Fools who flee from studying the scriptures or practicing self devotion and reason have adopted the Vaishnava faith as a path leading to their better being. Practice and diligence are said to be steps to self enlightenment, and rites and ceremonies are represented as secondary courses resorted to when people are unable to practice the former. The senses being unmanageable, what is the good of ceremonial observances? The senses being under control, it is useless to observe the ritual. Without rationality and dispassion of his spirit, It is hard to have Vishnu when there is cool and calm reasoning of the mind. It is as useless to have the idol of Vishnu as placing a lotus in the hand of dead and liberated. When you have the qualities of abstraction and composure in your mind, think you have everything in yourself. These being in your possession, you become an adept. Otherwise, you are an ass in a forest. Men are eager to find favor in the sight of the gods. Men are eager to find favor in the sights of the gods, but they do not seek the favor of their hearts and minds. Vishnu, the indwelling spirit of the body, is situated in the innermost soul of every individual. Only the ignorant fool forsakes the innermost Vishnu and seeks the outer form to lead him to the other. The consciousness dwelling in the cavity of the heart is the true body of the everlasting spirit. The outward form of Vishnu, holding the conch shell, club, lotus, and the discus, is only a false representation. He who forsakes the real form to follow the fictitious, let ambrosia pass from his hand in order to pursue some promised sweet delicacy. He who is not settled in the charming scenery of his spiritual meditation lets his frantic mind rove at large after every object that presents itself before him. He who doesn't have the abstract knowledge of the soul in himself is governed by his infatuated mind and worships the image bearing the conch, discus, club, and lotus in its hands as the supreme Lord and God. By practice of continued austerity and a prolonged worship of this deity, the devotee's mind becomes purified in process of time and gets rid of its turbulent passions at last. The daily practice of self-control and abstract meditation gives the mind purity, and like the mango fruit, the mind gets its accompanying virtues one by one. The soul is set to obtain the virtues of peace, contentment, and rest through the external adoration of Vishnu. This is why the practice of idol worship is prescribed in the scriptures. He who obtains his blessing from the all powerful God gets it as a reward from the merit of his long practice, like the fruit of a tree. Mental labor is the foundation of every improvement and of all lasting good in life, just as a well cultivated soil is the cause of a good harvest. Even digging the ground and shaping a hill produces no good without application of mind. Man may undergo 1,000 reincarnations and wander about the earth in various births and shapes, and yet they find no rest or composure of their minds. They may worship Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva forever and gain their favor also, and yet can have no salvation owing to the perturbed state of their minds. Leave off worshipping the visible form of Vishnu, either internally or externally in your mind or before your sight. Put an end to your reincarnation by meditating only upon your consciousness. Behold the unstained form of the one infinite God in your conscious self by forsaking whatever it is conscious of. Taste the sweet essence of the one real entity and go over the ocean of repeated births in this mortal world. With this, chapter 43 comes to an end, and we will rest our reading session here itself. This is completed with the grace of Lord Ram, and by his grace only, we will again meet for further reading of chapter 44 onwards. Shivoham, friends. Until then.